Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, one of the UK's biggest farming companies says upheaval lies ahead for the industry.
Simply continuing to produce wheat or the other combinable crops at a loss is unsustainable in all measures of the word. It's unsustainable at a business level, it's unsustainable for a farmer and landowner level, and therefore it's unsustainable for an industry level.
We'll hear from the Group Chief Executive of Velcourt later. Let's start, though, with rain. Earlier this autumn, experts on the National Drought Group, which includes the Met Office, water companies and the Environment Agency, said that a wet end to the year would be needed to reverse 7 months of below-average rainfall and replenish groundwater, as well as rivers and reservoirs. The amount of moisture held in the soil, too, will decide whether autumn-sown crops germinate well. Scientists at the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology are measuring soil moisture using cosmic ray neutrons. I kid you not. It might sound like something from sci-fi, but we sent our reporter Marie Lennon to Berkshire because it was cheaper than sending her to space to find out more.
Of course, the day we come out to talk about how dry it's been, we have been dodging heavy showers all day. But we are out on an organic farm in Berkshire where a herd of shorthorns are grazing, intrigued by what we're doing in their field. In the middle of the field, fenced off, is a research-level weather station. Jonathan Evans from the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology is with me. So alongside these various rain gauges and attached to some solar panels, there is this white steel tube suspended off the ground. What is this?
So this is really innovative technology to measure large area soil moisture. And the great thing about this is it's a non-contact measurement. It's above the ground. It's not even touching the soil, and measures across the whole field about an area of 12 hectares and measures soil moisture down to about 20 or 30 centimetres.
And how is it doing that?
So it uses a really clever technique by measuring cosmic ray neutrons, and these are naturally occurring from deep in space. They generate phenomena like the Northern Lights, which we're more familiar with. These neutrons are around us all the time. They interact with the hydrogen in the water, in the soil, and they're scattered back to our sensor that just continually counts those neutrons. And from that neutron count, we can get a really good value for the water content of the soil in the whole field.
So this year, we know it's been dry, but what do we know about the moisture levels of the soil? Quite how extraordinary has this year been from what you can see so far?
Well, interesting year, a difficult year for farmers, but hydrologically, we went from a really wet February where soils were near saturation, and then the rainfall just dropped off, at least in the south of England, so that we quickly found the soils drying out to really record low levels for the time of year. And then that continued into the late spring and summer, and going into autumn, we still haven't recovered from that situation. Soils are well below their normal wetness for the time of year.
So that's this year, but the point of this is that you've got huge amounts of data. From that, you can start to map out what future years and future seasons might look like. What is it showing?
With climate change, if we are not addressing that properly, then the severe droughts like we've seen this year could become as frequent as every 2 to 3 years by 2070.
Is there any sense from what you know so far about different farming methods and how that can have an impact on the overall soil moisture?
Research does show that with higher soil organic carbon content, you can increase the soil water holding capacity. So that can give some resilience to drought. However, I would say with the length and duration of this year's drought, the extent of it, I think even those measures are probably are not sufficient to give a full resilience to drought.
Micrometeorologist Jonathan Evans with our reporter Marie Lennon there. Now, listen up. Can you spot a difference between this sound and this one? To be absolutely honest, I'm not sure I can. But the difference could be key to finding and eradicating an invasive species. The first sound you heard was a beehive, which is under threat from the second, the Asian hornet nest. It's also known as a yellow-legged hornet and arrived here in the UK in 2016. While it's not yet taken hold, this highly effective predator, which can destroy a beehive in just a few days, is still here, with 28 nests found this year and double the number of sightings than reported last year. Well, all this week we are looking at invasive species and how to tackle them. And it seems that here the sound may be a way of finding and eradicating the Asian hornet. Sophie Gray, a researcher at the University of Southampton, told me why they can be elusive.
The real problem with them is the fact that, unlike the European hornet nests that are usually in trees, Asian hornet nests can sort of be anywhere. We've found that they could be underground, or they could be in a wall of a house, or 20 foot up in a tree. There's really no common pattern with where they are.
We heard a beehive and a hornet's nest there. To be honest, I could barely tell the difference. So how does the sound of the nest help?
By taking acoustic measurements next to these beehives or hornet nests or different species as well, we can extract what frequency that they mainly are, and from that we can build a drone or some sort of aerial device that hopefully can help us find these nests more quickly and safely, because obviously getting close to a hornet's nest is not particularly nice for anyone.
So the idea is it then that you'd put the sort of sound detection bit on a drone and just slowly drift it across and hope it would zone in on them?
Yeah, completely. So we already know that through volunteers or the public saying that they've seen an Asian hornet, we can get relatively close quickly. So we can get to an area, but then within that area, these nests, even though they can be up to a metre wide, they're so camouflaged that it's then that point that takes 2 or 3 days for someone to go and find them. Whereas we believe that using acoustics, we can put a drone around an area and basically listen for this specific frequency that we have to then find the nest.
Presumably you could use the same approach for all sorts of different things, could you?
Well, exactly. I mean, at the moment our interest is really with invasive species because we want to protect our native species and our native biodiversity. But, you know, there's been other issues within the farming world of other invasive species, and we think that we can use this technology in the future for that too.
Sophie Gray from the University of Southampton. A government-commissioned review examining why profitability is such a problem for farming and what should be done about it is expected to be delivered to DEFRA this week, publication date TBC. Its author, Baroness Batters, the former president of the National Farmers Union and now a crossbench peer, has already warned that the next 6 months will be pivotal for farms, with farmers facing what she's described as a cliff edge. As a sign of just how difficult this moment is for the arable sector in particular, one of the country's biggest farming companies, Velcourt, has given notice to a fifth of the landowners it works with that it will either leave, restructure or renegotiate its contracts, depending on discussions with them. Nick Shorter, Group Chief Executive of Velcourt, says the industry is facing an uncomfortable period of adapting to life without subsidies. But he began by explaining how contract farming works.
Contract farming is where a landowner contracts out the overhead operations of the farm, often where 2 or 3 farms can be put together. So the landowner has the opportunity to stay as the farmer, stay on the farm, and then the contractor, often with management, comes in and provides the contracting services, if you like, often supplying the machinery, the labour, the fuel, the power. The output of the farm is then divided between the 2 parties, usually loosely on the principle of a 50-50 type arrangement. So if you like, a rental equivalent for the farmer and the cost recovery plus a share of profit for the contractor.
Now, you've given notice to a fifth of your landowners. Are these largely farms which are unprofitable now or which you think will be unprofitable in the future?
A bit of both. Really the important part for us was to understand what the future looks like. So really this process was about understanding where we had the highest exposure to risk, whether that's because of the underlying land type, because of the removal of support payments. And then the notice enables us simply to enter into a conversation or or a negotiation with those clients to understand what the outcome for the farms would look like in Harvest 27.
So is this largely because the subsidy system is being phased out and has pretty much gone now?
Ultimately, it comes down to the underlying economics of it. And of course, the one thing that subsidies do is subsidise. That subsidy support has enabled those businesses to continue to trade at a profit. And our assessment of this space is that certainly if you look forward to the next couple of years, we're in a relatively oversupplied, depressed commodity market, and we've come through a period of pretty high inflation over the last 2 to 3 years. That even where we've got some of the lowest operating costs in the industry for these combinable crop farms, without subsidy, in the current pricings that we can achieve for those crops, there simply isn't enough revenue generated for the landowners to have a rental equivalent and for the contractor to make a profit.
How do environmental schemes fit into this? For instance, the Sustainable Farming Incentive, the SFI, when that reopens, how does it fit in?
It's a really important part of those businesses. Every single one of our combinable crop businesses has an SFI scheme on it, or its predecessor, the Countryside Stewardship's kind of mid-tier scheme. This is about recognising the fact that those schemes are almost separate when you look at it in terms of land use to the traditional cash crops. In that they achieve really good outcomes. There's a cost to deliver that system, but that is a separate set of economics compared to whether or not you can make a profit from growing crops.
When you do end these agreements with landowners, will this be land which will go out of food production, either because it's not good enough or people find something more profitable?
There will be an element of that. I don't think necessarily that we will end these agreements in all cases. Some of them we will may be able to renegotiate. I mean, I think this does come back to a wider piece when you look at the overall combinable crop farming in the UK as a whole, which is around this sort of relative productivity of land. Invariably, when you have a long-term broadacre subsidy that pays out at a consistent rate, the more marginal land will still remain profitable to produce. Strip that away, and then it very much comes down to what is the productivity of that land and what is the best use of it. And land which consistently can produce good levels of technical yield will continue to be in combinable crop farming and food production. And land which is marginal is more likely to be looked at alternative land uses, whether that's energy or environmental outcomes.
And in fact, if we go back to when the post-Brexit schemes were being discussed right at the beginning, there was some acknowledgement that there would be quite a bit of churn. Are we now looking at a period of actually painful restructuring for the farming industry?
I think that's right. I think that is exactly what will happen. I mean, that doesn't mean that through this restructuring there won't be lots of opportunities for new business, for different types of land use. But certainly, if you look at it today, simply continuing to produce wheat or the other combinable crops, at a loss is unsustainable in all measures of the word. It's unsustainable at a business level, it's unsustainable for a farmer and landowner level, and therefore it's unsustainable for an industry level.
Baroness Batters is about to hand in to DEFRA her review of farm profitability. What can she say that the government could do to improve the situation?
It can consider, in my mind, sort of two probably key areas. The first is policy and the second is regulation. So from a policy perspective, we know that the SFI scheme was closed. We know that the Countryside Stewardship scheme is coming to an end. Understanding what the future of that looks like will be really key to the future of farm profitability. And then I guess from a regulation perspective, transparency through that supply chain, holding retailers, holding processors to account to ensure that we're able to trade consistently with against sort of imports, for example, to ensure that we're not putting legislation in place which penalises UK food production when compared to the equivalent supply in of imported products is going to be really crucial.
Nick Shorter, Group Chief Executive of Velcourt. And profitability in farming and the future shape of the industry are topics we're going to return to from several perspectives over the coming weeks. But that's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Sarah Swadling. And Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.